In the worst years of the Great Depression, an estimated 1.5 million men rode the rails across America, sleeping in boxcars, cooking over fires by the tracks, and surviving on a body of practical knowledge they shared and passed along to anyone willing to learn. They called themselves hobos, and they were not the bums the newspapers painted them as. They were workers without work, men with families they could no longer feed at home, riding the freights from harvest to harvest looking for whatever could be done in exchange for a meal and a coin. Here is what gets lost in the cartoons. The hobo culture of the 1930s was a sophisticated working system, with its own marks, codes, and skills, and the men who moved through it carried practical knowledge that kept 1.5 million people alive across a decade of hard times. Number 8 on this list was the simple sign that told a man whether a house would feed him. Number 12 was the cooking method that turned scraps into hot meals beside any railroad track in America. These 25 tricks weren't lost because the train stopped. They were lost because the men who knew them mostly chose, when times improved, to never speak of those years again. Before we start, hit subscribe, because this is the survival knowledge of a forgotten million. Let us count down. Number 15. The bedroll and what went in it. A hobo's bedroll was his entire household. A blanket rolled tight, a change of socks, a tin cup, a sharp knife, a small cook pot, matches kept dry, and a length of rope. The skill of packing light and packing right was the foundation of life on the road, and a man who carried too much soon lost it. Number 14. Catching a moving train safely. Catching out was the most dangerous moment of any journey. The hobo learned to grab the ladder of a slow-moving freight, swing himself up, and find a safe spot inside a boxcar. The skill required timing, strength, and judgment, and the men who got it wrong paid in injuries or worse. Number 13. Reading the freight schedule. First pattern break. The hobo learned which trains went where and when, watching the yards, talking to railroad men, trading information with other riders. He knew a fast freight that would carry him 500 miles from a local that would dump him in the next town. The skill of moving with the trains was a real craft, and the men who could read the rails got where they were going. Number 12. The Mulligan stew and the shared pot. The classic meal of the hobo jungle was Mulligan stew, a communal pot to which every man contributed what he had, a potato from one, an onion from another, a scrap of meat from a third, all cooked over a fire in a 5-gallon can. The skill of building a community meal from a dozen small contributions kept whole jungles fed, and the principle of sharing what you had was iron. Number 11. Cooking with a tin can over a small fire. A man's basic kitchen was a tin can with a wire handle, and he cooked beans, coffee, and stew over an open fire built between 2 stones. The skill was minimal, reliable, and learned in a single afternoon, and it fed men beside railroad tracks across America for an entire decade. Number 10. Following the harvest work. Second pattern break. The hobo did not ride aimlessly. He followed the harvests, the wheat in Kansas and the Dakotas, the apples in Washington, the citrus in California, taking field work for a few weeks and moving on. The skill of timing his arrival to the work was the difference between earning and starving, and the men who knew the calendar of American agriculture by heart kept themselves fed. Number 9. Doing chores for a meal. Between harvests, a hobo knocked at back doors and offered honest work, splitting wood, weeding gardens, mending fences, in exchange for a meal. Your great-grandmother, if she lived in a small town, fed many such men over the years, and they did real work for her in return. The skill of approaching politely, working honestly, and moving on without trouble was the working code of the road. Number 8. The marks left on fences and posts. The hobos developed a system of marks, simple signs drawn in chalk or scratched into wood, that told the next rider what to expect at a given house or town. A circle with an X meant a good place to ask for food. 2 shovels meant work was available. A cat meant a kind lady lived inside. This quiet intelligence network spared men hours of fruitless walking. Number 7. Avoiding the railroad bulls. The railroad police, called bulls, were a constant danger, and the experienced rider knew which yards were safe to walk through and which were patrolled hard. He knew which towns had bulls who would beat a man and which would simply chase him off. The skill of moving quietly through the yards was the difference between making a trip and spending a night in jail. Number 6. Keeping clean and looking presentable. Third pattern break. A hobo who looked like a tramp got nothing, but a man who washed up, shaved when he could, and kept his clothes mended was treated as a worker down on his luck. The rider's generation understood that appearance mattered, and the skill of cleaning up in a stream or at a public fountain, of brushing the dust off the coat, was a real survival practice that kept doors open across the country. Number 5. Holding a few coins back for emergencies. A man on the road kept his cash carefully hidden, in a boot, sewn into a coat, anywhere a thief would not find it. A few coins held back from temptation was the difference between catching a paying train and walking. The discipline of saving when there was almost nothing to save was a real character of the road. Number 4. The letter home and the family kept together. Many hobos rode because they had families they could not feed, and they sent home what they earned, sometimes in small money orders, sometimes hand-delivered when they could make their way back. The skill of staying connected to a distant family, of keeping the marriage alive across months of separation, was a hard and quiet labor that the road demanded. Number 3. The respect among working men. Despite the rough conditions, there was a real code among working hobos, of sharing what you had, of not stealing from another rider, of helping a man who was hurt or sick. The skill of being a man others could trust on the road was as valuable as any practical knowledge. Number 2. Knowing when to step off the rails. The wisest riders knew when to stop, when the work came back, when the family needed them home, when the road had given all it could. The skill of judgment about when to end the journey was as important as any skill on the trains, and the men who came home in time were the ones who recognized the moment. Number 1. The dignity of the working man down on his luck. Above all, the hobo of the 1930s was a working man without work, holding to his dignity through circumstances that would have broken many. He did not beg easily. He worked when he could. He carried himself like a man with a place in the world even when he had no place to lay his head. That dignity was the deepest skill of the road, and the families who took him in and fed him knew it. The forgetting came when the war ended the Depression and the men came home, and the families were reunited, and nobody wanted to talk about the years on the rails again. The culture of 1.5 million men dissolved into private memory, and the practical knowledge of working travel went quiet. Here is your challenge. Pick one. Just one. Cook a big shared stew from whatever's in the kitchen. Help a stranger who's down on their luck. Remember the dignity of work even when work is hard to find. Tell me in the comments which one you'll try, and tell me if anyone in your family rode the rails, because somebody in your tree may have known every trick on this list. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again.